make gefilte fish. Never say never, whispers a voice. The voice is distinct, warm, suffused with the ring of possibility. Never say never. Like an archaeologist searching for links to a past existence, I tease apart the phrase, piece together disparate images, the crackling of onions in a frying pan, the sweet smell of chicken soup simmering in a pot, the army of tiny worms my imagination conjured when sautéed liver was put through the meat grinder, my mother's fingers in everything. To use any of the bright plastic measuring spoons that sat in drawers would be like defying gravity. Somehow, the German schutten, to pour, and or the Yiddish shitterein, a little of this, a little of that, gave rise to a Yiddishism for imprecise measuring. You shit, she'd say with a smile, always making me laugh. Coarse, kosher salt, cupped in her hand, would be thrown into a bowl of iceberg lettuce, tomatoes, cucumbers, and scallions, drizzled with mazola, tossed with her fingers, which I grew to believe contained some spice that enhanced everything she made, which is only part of the reason I will never make gefilte fish. I could say it's too time-consuming. I'd be tempted to use my Cuisinart. Jarred fish is good enough. But all of these excuses miss the point. To make gefilte fish the way my mother did requires the right mix of instinct, tradition, carp, pike, salt, pepper, onions, and yes, her fingers, along with certain assumptions tied to the very ritual of preparing for the holidays. For her, it meant taking off from work days ahead of time, picking up the chicken and fish and liver and vegetables and fruit and cake, sending the chicken back to the butcher if there was a feather or a bruise on any piece, returning fish that smelled fishy. For me, it meant going to sleep to the smell of freshly made chopped liver, waking up to find my mother shaping a melange of fish into grainy ovals the size of her palm. It's tempting to regret the loss of some things once taken for granted. As a young girl growing up in Brooklyn, observing the holidays was a mixed pleasure. I loved dressing up, meeting friends in front of the shul, stepping inside intermittently. My large extended family, on the other hand, crowding our apartment, filling it with cigarette smoke, eating as if there were no tomorrow, made me wish for something simpler, less overwhelming. When I grew up, moved into Manhattan, started to make my own way in the world, returning home for Passover or Rosh Hashanah seemed even more overwhelming. You make too much food, I told my mother every year. It will go, she said, filling shopping bags with food put aside for me. It always does. It's no small irony that my mother died during Passover. One of my cousins, an exceptional cook, made gefilte fish that year. He had the instinct I would need to acquire, and the time and patience, if not my mother's fingers. I made chopped liver with another cousin. My mother was in the hospital, and we telephoned her while we cooked, keeping alive her ritual we hoped would sustain her. And us. We used her meat grinder. The voice returns, tells me with authority that I should never say never. I pull a cookbook from my shelf, turn to recipes for gefilte fish, which may have originated in Germany or Holland sometime after the expulsion of Jews from Spain in 1492, or it may have been invented in Russia or Poland, or perhaps it was only the culinary ingenuity of a housefrau on a budget in need of a food stretcher. One thing is certain, gefilte fish is Jewish. I scan the recipes. The basic recipe seems complicated. The pressure cooker method doesn't ring true. Romanian style requires leaving the head of the fish attached, removing the flesh from the skin and bones, preparing filleted fish as in the basic recipe, filling the skeleton, of the fish with pulp. This is Gefilte, i.e. filled fish, at its most literal. You shit, says a voice. I close the book.